Welcome to another episode of Before the Crowd, the podcast where we delve into important and sensitive topics affecting communities. I'm your host, Downer14, and today we're discussing a critical issue that has been making headlines in Zambia recently: suicide among the youth. Our episode title is Suicide Really the Way? Mhm. But before we get into the episode, I'd like to tell our viewers, please support and share this podcast. You would be doing me a large favor. You can find me on any leading streaming platforms. That's Amazon Music, Amazon Prime, if I'm lucky. You can also find me on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the rest. And if you'd also like, you can support my music. You can find me on Spotify and any other streaming platforms. Thank you. Please like, support, share. I'm begging you, please. No, seriously, like and support. You'd be doing me a huge favor. I'm not joking. I'm not going to stop talking about it. And shout out to the Gen Z Chronicles. You guys are now ranked above me in on on Spotify. Um, I can't wait to rank above you. So if you guys or anyone listening has heard of the Gen Z Chronicles, it's another Zambian podcast. You guys should really give it a listen to. And if you do, please tell them I sent you over there. Support the boy. I get it. I told you I'm not going to stop. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Ish, the English bundle clapped mid sentence there, guys. I'm sorry. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the topic. We're going to start with a recent incident that shocked many in Lusaka. Moses Sichwani attempted to take his own life by climbing a communications tower at Mukandawiro Combined School. Thankfully, he was persuaded to come down after hours of being on the tower. According to the police's spokesperson, Ray Hamunga, Sichowani, supposedly a butchery assistant, left his home early in the morning and spent hours on the tower, where he was later convinced and persuaded to not take his life. It's important to consider the underlying factors that could lead someone to such an extreme action. Reports suggest that Mr. Sichowani was disqualified from military recruitment due to his age. This could have been a devastating blow to his aspirations and self esteem, which may have contributed to his decision making. Joining me today to discuss this issue is a lovely and wonderful self proclaimed psychologist but friend of mine, a mental health self proclaimed expert with a deep understanding of youth and the challenges they face in Zambia. Thank you for being here, Panda Bear, Juanita. I'd also like to say you can find her on YouTube. I think her YouTube page is called Panda Bear Diaries on YouTube. You can find her there. Um, I'm trying to be a good friend, supporting everyone I come across to. So, yeah.
Greetings to everyone around the world. My name is Awanita Kayombo and I'm a student pursuing a bachelor's degree in psychology at Mulungushi. And today I would love to shed some light, or rather share my thoughts about suicide. Like my colleague has shared today, is suicide really the way? That is the question. Is it really the way? Is it really the only option we can do? So I would like to talk about, before we talk about the issue that occurred a couple of days ago, um, from Moses, I would like to talk about the recent happenings, rather, that have happened in Zambia. To point out, there are so many suicide stories that have occurred in the last recent years that leave a lot of people baffled, or rather shocked, or in a limbo of questions. We tend to ask ourselves, what is really happening? And you find that most of these suicide cases are in our youth, or rather, yeah, in our youth. Let's say from 15 to 35. You find that a lot of people are tending to commit suicide, and they are not so sure of what's happening in their mind, or rather in their thoughts. So today I just want to shed some light, or rather add some contributions to how suicide is really taking a toll on each and every one of us. Rather, the victims themselves, the family that's left behind, and the friends that are left behind.
I completely agree and understand where you're coming from. Um, Suicide in Zambia has never really been a topic most people choose to talk about because we're a Christian nation, of course, but mostly because we rarely had information about it, especially for us who are in this in between stage of like millennials and Gen Z and Gen X, where like the middle children, we never had information to suicide because of like media and whatnot. But lately, the past 7 or 10 years, it's really become prevalent, especially with phones and the internet. We have more access to information and stories. And I think maybe it's also just growth because I've seen a lot of my friends or close friends or friends of friends who have had stories of friends who killed themselves because they were unable to deal with the emotions they were having at the present moment, and they couldn't exactly find an outlet or a way of managing and regulating their emotions. I, for one, believe because we've gotten to a stage where there are more people who are getting educated on both sides of the gender spectrum, there then becomes more factors that are included or at play, that contribute to depression, anxiety, you know, and the whole suicidal thought. Of course, the society's pressure, academic stress, unemployment, personal challenges, especially when you look at the incident with Mr. Sichwani. It highlights a lot of the issues that most of the youth around Africa and Zambia itself have to deal with, because a lot of us have high aspirations, we have high goals, and then because we can't regulate ourselves, we turn to different vices and different ways to deal with these emotions. Some that are healthy and some that aren't exactly healthy. In this case, we're talking of the unhealthy because there are people who have the tendency to say, "Hey, I saw this in a movie, I saw this in a story, I heard this and such," and you're left wondering what's right for me. And I feel we, as the children of a lost generation, have to realize that, look, as much as we want to experiment, we also need to regulate ourselves. We want to discover, we want to rewrite the way the stars and galaxies around us work and are understood, but we have to regulate ourselves correctly, properly, suited to ourselves. You understand? And that's going out to the viewers listening, because as much as my demographic is 20 to 25-year olds, we also need to understand that we are big brothers and little brothers and so forth, so on and so forth. We have a chance to help people who are coming under us talk about these things. And if we don't, we leave them to have to discover on their own and have to deal with the trials and tribulations of not knowing how they feel because they don't have a proper example. And that's not good. Yeah, it breeds a new niche of people. Niche not being the operative word there that I can use, but that's the word I'm going to use at the moment. But yeah, all that being said, my question for you is, how can we as a community address this issue?
First and foremost, as you may know, I am a psychologist. So let's dive into suicide. Concerning Moses Sichone, you see, the issue at hand is for someone to reach an extent of climbing to their death, it's very scary and very shocking. I feel like these things come about from what society has put in us. We'll talk about expectations in every society, or rather wherever we come from. There are certain expectations that our family and friends expect us to achieve at a certain age. And in Mr. Moses Sichone's case, you see that maybe he was from what was said, it said that he he was rejected because of age. I think he was beyond the age of acceptance for the military. I don't know what it was, whether the military, the police, something like that. So you see that when he was rejected, obviously he expected that if he gets his job, this and that, things shall be well in his thinking. But then he was beyond the age. So in his thinking, or in his thoughts, he thought the best way is to jump, which is not the best case at all for anyone. You see, suicide is something, I think suicide is something delicate, and I feel like right now in the African setup, this is when it's become more vocal, and people are trying to understand how people's mental health is is right now. Because we as Africans, sorry to say this, if you're listening and you're an African, with all respect, I say this with the best of hearts. I feel like as Africans, we've always taught ourselves to be strong. There are certain things, especially for men, they will, well, we expect men not to cry. We expect men to be strong. I'll give an example of in Zambia. There's this thing of memes which are going around, and it's funny, but this thing of umaume, it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, it's a joke, but some take it that this is what it is. A man shouldn't feel, a man shouldn't hurt. When in reality, a man is allowed to feel and a man is allowed to express himself. But I don't know if this comes from our forefathers of how men should have been. I don't know if our forefathers expected us to be emotional, less a man shouldn't express himself and all that. It's shown as a sign of weakness, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of men these days in our society. And in this case, it brings about a lot of insecurities. Suicide, one of its causes is having insecurities as the factors or contributions to what may lead someone into suicide. We have insecurities, not feeling accepted, society pressure, peer pressure, not being involved, loneliness, and expectations. Yet again, I'm going to shed a lot of light on loneliness and not being involved. You see, we live in a society, like I've said, most suicide cases, or rather, have been recorded from ages of 15 to 35 and also beyond that, but it's quite rare because you find at this particular stage we're trying to find ourselves, we're trying to understand the realities of life, we're trying to navigate friendships, relationships, family, work, everything. We bring in so much at this age that we want things to go our way. We don't expect things to fall apart, and that's a bad thing. We should always look at the double standards of life and understand that not everything is going to be perfect. No, but we should understand that life is 50-50. It can either go 50 good and 50 bad. So it's also, suicide is being shunned, or it is a taboo because it's frowned upon to be a taboo in the sense that it shows weakness. From the religious point of view, as a Christian out there, or whatever belief that any of you may have, you see, as a Christian, I feel like we're supposed to hold on to faith and understand that our Lord, our God, is there for us. And then also, whatever respect for religions that you have, we or people out there may have, I think you ride on your belief and you ride on knowing that suicide is never the answer. And in the world that we live in today, there are so many options or helpful or help that helps us to seek advice, to seek counsel, therapy, shrinks, you name them, psychologists, everything. I feel like the world that we live in now has given us more options to express ourselves, to have more opportunities. I feel like if you don't feel accepted, there are so many groups or rather organizations that can put you in a space that you will feel accepted. And also society's peer pressure. I feel like society has dragged a lot of people down because society really expects us to be things that we are not, and this is very stressful. And not feeling involved, I feel like even amongst our peers there are times and days when we don't feel accepted or valued, or we don't feel like people are listening to us. So much we can talk about with suicide.
And I couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to suicide. There's a lot to deal with and have to solve and approach and speak about. Education and awareness are key. We need to promote mental health education in schools, workplaces, and communities. Provide accessible counseling services is vital so that individuals facing difficulties can seek help without fear or judgment and stigma. So, my lovely viewers, is suicide really the way? I ask. It's clear that there's a deeper issue at play and that there is need for supportive environment. If you or someone you know is struggling, don't hesitate to reach out for help or even just leave a comment so that I could talk to them or leave them a special message. Yes, we are all people of the same home, garden, and planet. We deserve to help each other one way or the other. Anyway, that's all for today. I'd like to extend my gratitude to our expert guest for shedding the light on the topic. Remember, your voice matters and there's always hope. Thank you for joining us on Before the Crowd. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. This has been your host, Down at 14. And by the way, before we end anything, I'd like to say you can catch me on, you guessed it, any leading streaming platform. That's Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and any other podcasting service out there. I'm sorry for the pausing. There's a lot of interesting nothing happening here. But yeah, um, I'm down at 14. Peace.